If I say The Walking Dead, you mostly think of Robert Kirkman's 2003 comic series or the AMC TV show it spawned. But did you know this wasn't the first time a comic went by that name? Back before any Walking Dead series was conceived, a foam insulation company, known as Aircell, was established in Ottawa, Ontario, by a man named Ken Campbell. When the business lost federal funding in 1985, one of Ken Campbell's friends and employees, Barry Blair, proposed turning the company into a comic book publishing company. Blair had been self-publishing his works since 1980, and his friend agreed to the suggestion. This was in the midst of the independent publisher boom, spurred on by a little comic known as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and this company managed to make a name for itself. While it never reached the likes of Marvel or DC, it was popular in the indie scene, and in 1999 they even published the Men in Black series, which would later become a movie franchise. But, like I said, they were following in the steps of TMNT, and as such, their comics were published in black and white since it was cheaper. Aircell couldn't last on its own, however. Facing low sales, Aircell became a division of Malibu in 1988. The following year, J.W. Somerville's The Walking Dead was published, bringing us a comic under that name for the first time. While Kirkman's The Walking Dead would come to have some similarities to this original series, it also differed greatly. Somerville's features a cop fighting zombies in a black and white art style, but that is about where the similarities end. Well, kind of. You see, what is never confirmed in either Kirkman's comic or the AMC show what really caused the virus, Kirkman has stated online that the reason for the virus in the comics was space spores. Many people don't take this as canon since 1. It was set outside the comic, and 2. Because it is most likely just a reference to Night of the Living Dead, which is commonly hailed as the first piece of media portraying the modern zombie. Now, in Somerville's series, issue 1 starts with a space battle in which a ship is shot down, crashing into a cemetery in Washington, D.C. An alien rejuvenation gas leaks out onto our planet, raising the dead from their graves with a craving for flesh. We see some of them retain their memories, being able to speak, use guns, and even set traps. In case you are unaware, Kirkman's zombies, in contrast, are mostly mindless. But enough comparisons, let's get into the actual contents of Somerville's series. Like I said before, the comic starts with a space battle, ending with the dead rising from the cemetery, their eternal sleep interrupted. We also see that the US military is aware of the battle and crash, but we don't see them make any plans yet. Instead, we see a woman at a church, saying goodbye to her husband for the final time, when he sits up in his coffin. He speaks before attacking his wife, asking her to come with him. The narrator informs us that some dead come back with their memories, but others are more like the zombies in Kirkman's series, dumb and slow. We then follow the man as he runs from a trio of the undead, a man who seeks help where many do, a church. Unfortunately for him, it holds no comfort. Instead, he just finds Father Brannigan infected. He rushes back outside through his side door, but doesn't make it far. As he stops to take a breath, a zombie from a different group gets a hold of him, telling the first group he belongs to the Trappers group now. He opens fire, taking out the trio and the father with one sweep of his gun. This zombie is a member of the Kids from Hell, a gang of zombies led by Jack Crack. The gang all feast on the corpse between panels before making jokes as they play with his skull. Their fun continues in song as one of them is asked to rap and obliges. Before he can get too deep into his bars, his head explodes as we meet our main character, the ex-cop Joe Barker. He manages to take out a few more of the undead before the kids fire back. As he drives away, Jack Crack's dialogue hints at a history between him and Barker. Barker gets back to the police station he and his group have been surviving out of, and we meet Keith, Chris, and Max, the latter two chewing Barker out for poking the bear, scared he will die or will bring retaliation back on all of them. That is where we end Issue 1. Issue 2 begins with a speech from the President of what remains of the United States of America, confirming many things about this forsaken world. Firstly, the chemical, despite being spilled in DC, has affected the world as a whole, meaning this is not an isolated incident. Second, we learn that the smartest minds left in the world, or at least left in the USA, are trying to find an antidote to the chemical to end the threat, but if they cannot, the US will turn to nuclear options. Two of his advisors talk and argue about the benefits and downsides of a nuclear detonation after his speech, wondering about the effects, especially in populated areas. The conversation is interrupted as the president is called to the side of his bedridden wife. As she complains of her pain, the president reminisces, raising her spirits and his in turn, before she starts to cough up liquid. The president calls for a doctor before we cut away. Back at the police station, the group has used their radio to tune into the president's speech. The group discusses the hopelessness of the situation before the station is pelted with gunfire. The kids from hell are here, ready for their final face-off against Barker and his crew. Jack Crack's words tell us he and his gang killed Barker's family, revealing Barker's motivation and his blatant disregard for his own safety. As the humans and zombies have a gunfight, the zombie station on the streets and the humans on the roof, Max heads to ready their escape vehicle, a van, and he takes the elevator since he is wheelchair-bound. Right as he makes it to the garage, we find ourselves back outside in the thick of the fight. The humans gun down some of the kids, but the kids gun some of them down too. The kids have a secret weapon, however, an RPG. They fire at the police station. The remaining humans on the roof, Barker, Keith, and Chris, realize they have to flee the now burning building, but as they get to the garage, they find Max stuck under collapsed beams. Alive, but trapped. Fire licking ever closer, causing sweat to break out on his face. The rooftop survivors realize they don't have time to save him, and Max sends him away, despite Barker's protests. After reluctantly loading up in the van, the rooftop survivors burst through the garage door, their car being riddled with gunfire as they go. When the zombies flood into the garage, they're met with Max, his clothes partially on fire, wielding a shotgun, which he uses to dispatch some of the undead. We cut away from him, though, before too much damage is done, following the van and its passengers on their journey. Keith hangs out the van's sunroof, wiping out two kids following in a car with a burst of automatic gunfire. The zombies crash as Keith celebrates. While inside the van, Barker reveals his intentions to go back for Max, the issue ending with this statement, "We're gonna get him back, even if all we find are his bones." Issue 3 opens with a twisted facsimile of a meal. A zombie, seemingly mindless, strips meat from bones with sounds taken from a nightmare. As we pull back to see the full scene, we see a group of the undead gathered around, feasting on a half-stripped body. Exposed ribs, almost completely bare, the corpse is suspended by its legs, one of which has a note pinned through it. As one of the zombies takes a break from this inhuman act, its attention drawn by a noise. Its head explodes as our trio of rooftop survivors are revealed. They continue their barrage, killing the zombies, and in turn, ending the desecration of what we learn as Petrie, presumably another trophy taken from the police station by the kids. We saw two more people on the roof that died, so it must be one of their corpses. Jack Crack left a note for Barker, telling him to meet the kids at a playground if he wants to see Max again. The trio loads back in the van, knowing they're headed for a trap, but having no alternative to save Max, they head out. We then find ourselves back with the president, finding him at his wife's funeral, a father reading scripture as they lower her coffin into the ground. The president heads back inside, meeting with his wife's doctor, where we learn the coffin must have been empty. The doctor and president seem to be the only ones aware she is a zombie, trapped in a glass cage to be studied, presumably for the doctor to find a way to bring her back to the president. Now, I will come back to this storyline later at the end, but within the actual comic itself, this is the last we see of the president and the other characters surrounding him. In the meantime, the van arrives at the playground, and the trio finds a gruesome scene waiting for them. Crucified on a basketball goal is Max, nails through his palms and the stumps of his legs, empty eye sockets dripping with blood. As the trio mourns, they are ambushed from behind. Keith is killed before they can react, but Chris is fast on the trigger and takes out the attackers. As Barker reaches for his dropped gun, he is stopped by a line of bullets erupting in front of him. The kids reveal their elevated position, Jack Crack taunting Barker about the fact that they didn't eat Max, or at least not much of him, instead just eating for his eyes, letting the blood loss from the crucifixion kill him instead. While Jack is talking, Barker gets his gun, opening fire at the zombies, killing one. Unfortunately, Jack and another get away, yelling to Barker to chase them. Barker and Chris take the bait, Chris stepping past a blind corner and getting a knife in her chest for her troubles. Barker opens fire, dispatching a few before getting riddled with gunfire himself. He falls back against a fire axe, breaking the glass containing it as he does. The main story of issue 3 ends with a taunt from Jack. Now I said main story, implying there's more in the comic, and there is. A dark humor standalone mini-story makes up the last 4 pages. This story is entitled A Dead Vignette, and despite it not affecting the main story, I will still cover it for reasons that will become obvious. It opens in a graveyard, a woman running from a zombie before being overtaken and bitten on the arm. Her reaction seems off, however, saying, "Ow, that hurts, ouch!" Not what you would typically hear in a life or death situation. We quickly learn why when a man shouts, "Cut!" into a megaphone. As it is revealed this is a movie set, the actress, Judy, argues with the director, George, complaining about the extra biting too hard. After Judy threatens to leave the production, George tells Bill, the extra playing a zombie, to take it easy. As Bill angrily stomps back up the hill to reset the scene, he notices a hole in front of a grave that wasn't there just a few minutes earlier. He assumes it's for the movie, hopes he's not supposed to get down in it. That's when he hears a snap from behind, causing him to turn. "Action!" George yells as we cut back to him. Judy starts running down the hill, Bill cresting it in the background, but something isn't right. He screams for help as he gets closer, one of his arms torn off his body, but all Judy can do is turn and watch as he is ripped apart and eaten, his entrails spilled in a horrid display of the zombie's power. Unfortunately for Judy, 2 zombies were following the man, and one lunges for her. Her long hair is her death sentence when the zombie finds a grip on it. As the cameraman questions who they are, George dismisses the question, just happy with how good it looks. Judy coughs up blood as her neck is destroyed by the undead creature's teeth. The last panel shows a new character, Tom, asking if they might need help, but the director dismisses their questions once again, saying, "Who cares? I think we might have a hit on our hands, Tom." Now, in case you are not familiar or didn't pick up on it, this story is one huge reference to Night of the Living Dead. So let's talk about Night of the Living Dead. I'm not going to cover the full contents of the movie, but I will talk about some behind the scenes and characters in the movie. In 1968, George A. Romero and John Russo's film, Night of the Living Dead, became an instant hit. It introduced horror fans to their flesh-eating undead ghouls, which paved the way for the modern zombie. They introduce and combine concepts to create these creatures, including having to destroy the brain, the concept of having hordes, and their mindless nature. Now, let's compare some aspects of this film to the story that I just summarized. As I've previously stated, the entirety of this story is confined within a cemetery. In the movie, our first real location is a cemetery, where it just so happens we see zombies for the first time. Romero, the father of zombies, was not only the co-writer of the movie, but he was also the director, just like George in our comic. As for the other names, Tom and Judy are to the character's name in Romero's pictures, while Bill is the real name of one of the actors that played a zombie in Night of the Living Dead. With this seemingly random story explained, we can now move on to issue 4. Our story continues where it left off. Joe Barker bleeding out on the floor as Jack Crack gloats, but also reveals that he and the 3 zombies behind him are the last remnants of the kids from hell. He says they need new members and asks whether Barker wants to join them after he dies and turns, or if he wants to die now. He makes his choice, and Jack steadies his aim, but right as his finger tightens on the trigger, his hand suddenly falls, shot off by Chris, who has stumbled in, knife still in her chest. She manages to take out all 3 background zombies, but is killed in the process. While Jack is distracted, Barker struggles to his feet, ripping the fire axe from the wall and prepping for a fight. As the 2 prepare to fight, Jack says they are more similar than Barker may think. They're both dead after all. When Jack tries to pull a knife, Barker makes him drop it with a swift kick to the face, before dismembering the zombie, 1 shot for each person he took from Barker. Barker finishes him with a slash through the head, telling Jack's permanently dead corpse he was right, they are both dead, but Barker will stay that way. With that, Barker plants Jack's gun firmly in his mouth and destroys his own brain before he can turn. And this is the end of Somerville's The Walking Dead, or at least the main series. You see, after the last issue of this miniseries came out in December of 1989, The Walking Dead Zombie Special was released in May of 1999. Rather than continuing the open plot thread of the President and his zombie wife, we got 2 stories mostly unrelated to the main series. But I'm not going to talk about the special in this video, as this video is long enough as is. I'm going to talk about it in my next one. Talk about my opinions and what I think could have been done better in the story of the President and Joe Barker. I'll start with the President here, since there's much less ground to cover. Having not been introduced until issue 2, this storyline feels very underdeveloped and unfinished. The only things we learn from the President's dialogue is that he loves his wife and that he's a hypocrite. In his speech, he basically says he is willing to do anything, including dropping nuclear devices on populated areas to counter the growing zombie menace. But when his wife is infected, He keeps her safe and sound. This is not a bad character. In fact, it could be the start of a great character, but therein lies the issue. President needed more screen, or I guess panel time, to flesh him and his actions out. There are two places I feel could have been cut or reduced to finish his story. The first is the backup story, a dead vignette which doesn't add anything to the main story and feels like it interrupts the flow. Not that I hate the story, it just doesn't feel necessary or the most tonally appropriate. While there is humor in the comic in places, such as the zombie rap, at this point in the story, our main character is bleeding out and being taunted by the main antagonist, so this extra feels like tonal whiplash. The second moment is something I will discuss in the next section as I talk about the meat and potatoes of the comic, the story of Sergeant Joe Barker. In my opinion, he is a perfect representation of the consequences of revenge. While it makes sense Barker wants to take out the kids after they killed his family, his disregard for his own safety leads to a mutually assured destruction. He succeeds in his goal of wiping out the kids, but in the process he leads all his friends and other survivors, some of the only humans we know of left, to their deaths before dying himself. Everyone in the police station seemed like they respected and would follow the orders of Barker, Max and Chris seemingly only being upset he went out by himself, so if he had asked for help, the remnants of the police could have led a siege on the kids of hell, since it is obvious Barker knows where they gathered and was able to take out 6 by himself. While some people still may have died, having the drop would most likely have saved some of their lives. One thing I will say is that this has one of the most interesting moments I've seen, the ending. While in plenty of zombie media, people take themselves out before they can turn, usually it happens off camera, or much like Max staying behind, they sacrifice themselves to let others escape. It also perfectly illustrates the brutality of this twisted reality and the unfortunate fate of all who die. One thing I will say about the last issue is that the final battle feels much too long. It starts from page 1 and continues for 24 pages with multiple 2-page spreads and singular pages consisting of only one panel. In my opinion, as a random person on the internet with no published works, the last issue should have focused on both the President and Barker. While some satisfaction comes with seeing Jack Crack dismembered, I think it could have been more contained. Something more like this. I threw this together, so it's not the best, but this is 8 whole pages condensed into one, and it gets the same idea across. I am not sure what the writing process looked like on this series, but from the first issue, it was advertised as a 4-issue miniseries, and I wonder if Somerville had a plan or just made it up as he went along, which was more common than you would think, just look at the original team in T-Run, and possibly bit off more than he could chew, and wasn't able to finish both plotlines. If this was the case, I do think he was right in finishing Barker's story, and I really enjoyed the series overall. With that said, it's about time to bring this video to a close. If you enjoyed this video and learned something from it, consider liking and subscribing, and I hope you join me next time when I talk about the Zombie Special.